cost management in Microsoft Azure. How as cloud engineers will be able to manage costs. We're going to look at all that, but firstly, we'll be starting with Azure Policy, now called Policy. So I'll be sharing my screen. If you can see my screen, can you let me know with a reaction, or you can just unmute your mic to just say, yes, I can see your screen. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, so basically, let's look at Microsoft Learn and let's explore what Azure Policy is. So from Microsoft Learn, this documentation was updated April 3rd, 2025, and it describes Azure Policy as it helps to enforce organization standards and to assess compliance at scale through its compliance dashboard. So what Azure Policy is more or less like it is a governance tool that helps organization enforce policy. So we can see some policy definitions here, like things you can do to how you can use Azure Policy, basically. So it's more or less like the definition states here. So it helps organization enforce organization standard and to assess compliance at scale. So from this Microsoft Learn documentation here, we can see that common use cases for Azure Policy include implementing governance for resources consistency, regulatory compliance, security cost, and management. So with Azure Policy, you can create policies in your organization that prevent administrators from doing from performing some particular actions. So that's one use case of Azure Policy. So we can see here that it includes implementing governance for resource consistency, regulatory compliance. Like for instance, now there are some organizations that the part of the regulatory compliance of their country is that their data should be resident in their location. So basically, creating storage that will be resident in another location might not be allowed in such organization. So you can use Azure Policy to enforce policy to prevent administrators from creating resources on location outside their environment. And you can also use it for security, you can use it for cost, and you can use it for management also. So basically, that's just what Azure Policy is. So if we come down here to the overview, Azure Policy evaluates resources and action in Azure by comparing the properties of these resources to business rules. These business rules described in JSON format known as policy definitions. Once we get to the lab, we are going to see various policy definitions, and we are going to see how it simplifies management and several business rules. We are going to see also the policy definitions, also refers to as policy sets, policy initiative rather. So we are going to see all this during the presentation. So let me just go to Azure Portal. Let's start. So if you have any question and you want to ask, you can just drop your question on the chat. When I'm done, I'm going to attend to your questions. Yeah, someone said they can't see my screen. Corey, are you the only one that can't see my screen? Can any other person see my screen, please?
I can see your
Yes, I
screen.
Okay, I just want to confirm. So I've signed into Azure Portal.
I can
So
see your
this,
screen too.
yeah, yeah. So this is Azure Portal. I've already signed in. So if you want to sign in, you go to portal.azure.com. So this is where you can create several resources in Microsoft Azure. So now we just talked about policy. So if you want to create policy in Azure, you go to the search bar here. You can either type policy, then you click on policy. So we'll just wait for it to load. So now the policies, this is the policy page and the policy dashboard. So on the overview page now, this gives us the overall resource compliance. We can see 0%, then resources by compliance state. Just one resources is non-compliant, zero compliance. So more or less like it gives you an overview of the of the policies you have created. So here now, we can see the names of policies. If I click on view all now, it's going to show me all the policies that I have in my environment that I've assigned to a scope. So here now, I have allowed location. So this policy now, if we expand the scope, we are going to see the scope. So a scope now is more or less like where you are applying a policy to. You can apply a policy to a subscription and you can apply a policy to a resource group. So here now, compliance state, non-compliant. It's telling me that the state is non-compliant. Why this policy I created for allow location, it has not even started. So if we come here now, you can see the total resources. If I go ahead to click on it, it opens. So we can see that out of my resources here now, it will show me the resource. We can see YAF Cloud Computing. It is not compliant. Why? Why is it not compliant? Because require a tag and its value on this resource group, meaning that if I'm the resource in this resource group has to have a tag. So because this resource group doesn't have a tag, that's why it's flagging it. So if I want it to not to flag it, then I'm going to apply a tag to this resource group. So basically, that's just what compliance is. If, for instance, you create a compliance rule that, okay, I want all resource group in my environment to have a tag. Any resource in your environment that doesn't have a tag, it will flag it as non-compliant. The ones that have tags, it will be flagged as compliant. So basically, if I'm to use a more lighter explanation to explain it, it's just like, for instance, now maybe they said everybody, maybe let me use the choristers for an example. Maybe the choir master said everybody should wear maybe white and black this Sunday. And for instance, the choir master now said, okay, anything you have, you can also wear. If you don't have white and black, we are not limiting you. You can still wear something and come to church. So those that wear white and black to church on Sunday, those are the ones that are compliant. Then those that did not wear white and black, maybe they wear maybe purple and orange, or they wear black and check. So those ones are not compliant. So it's still the same thing. So in Microsoft now, if you apply a policy to a resource group and you say the resources in this resource group, they should have tag. So any resource in that resource group that doesn't have tag, automatically the resource is not compliant. So the ones that have tag will be compliant. So that's just Azure policy. So if we come back to the policy page here, we clicked on from the overview here. That was where we got the overview of the policies that we have and their scores. So for now, we have only created 2 policies, but we are going to create more in the course of this class. So if you come down to authoring here, we have definitions, we have assignments, and we have exemptions. So these are the 3 authoring steps. So, but I just want us to look at each of them. So if we click on get started now, we're going to see the get started page. So with Azure policy, implement proper guide rails and access compliance across the organization. So basically what Azure policy is more or less like is used by organizations to enforce compliance requirements across board. Because normally, if you don't use policy, some people might just overdo, or they might not even follow what you want them to do. Even if you tell some people, okay, if you are creating resources in this subscription, all the resources to be on West Europe, I don't want any resources there to be created on East US. Some people will still go and create resources on East US, maybe because they want to test or they want to try out something. But if you set up policy, even if the person is trying to do it, the person will not succeed. It won't work. So that is the advantage of using Azure policy. So let's come down to compliance. So if we click on compliance now, it will show us the overall resource compliance that we have. And the policies we have created, it will give us the compliance state. Like here now, our allowed location. Formally, when we checked it before, it was saying not started, but now it has completed. If I click on it now, so now it's telling me that overall resource compliance 100%. So this policy was allowed location, and the definition of this policy is, okay, if you are creating any resource, it should be on a specified location. If it's not on that location, that means it will flag it as non-compliant. So that's the scope of this policy. If I click on view assignments now, we're going to see the assignment. So this is it. List of allowed location, West Europe. That means any resources that is outside West Europe in the resource group that I applied the policy to, it should flag it as not compliant. And after this, even if somebody wants to create a resource on that resource group, if you don't select West Europe, it won't work. That's one advantage of Azure Policy, because it's used to enforce governance. It's used to enforce rules in organizations. So let's just go and create a policy. Now we are done with compliance. So if we click on remediation now, let's see what we have in remediation. So we can see that no assignment found. If we click on remediation tasks, no tasks. So if we have any remediation tags, it's going to work. So from here now, we can see this one in here. Remediation tags will not be shown if its corresponding assignment is deleted. During remediation task creation, if a policy definition reference ID parameter is specified, its value should be the same as it is specified in the initiative definition. So now you can see, okay, maybe you created a policy to install an application on a particular virtual machines or on a particular VMs in a resource group. So basically, if that extension has not been installed in a particular virtual machine, the virtual machine will be not compliant. So the remediation now will be to automatically install the application on that virtual machine. So that's remediation. Remediation is, okay, this thing is not the way it's supposed to be. Fix it. So that is remediation. So Corrideli, I can see your hands is raised. If you have a question, you can ask. Okay.
I wanted to ask you, what is the meaning of remediation and what is the importance of remediation?
Okay. So as it is, remediation now is like, maybe for instance, because where I saw remediation in play was when I used Azure Arc. Azure Arc is an hybrid agent that you can use to onboard your local servers to Microsoft Azure. You can mute your mic. Mute your mic. Your voice is echoing. So Azure Arc is an hybrid tool. It's used for hybrid management, whereby you can use to onboard your virtual machines, your local servers on-prem or in your local environment to Microsoft Azure so that you can manage them. So what happened was, after I onboarded 2 virtual machines from my local infrastructure to Azure, I wanted to monitor the capacity of that particular virtual machines. Like, I wanted to monitor the usage, I wanted to monitor the matrix, I wanted to monitor the disk capacity, should in case if maybe the disk is overutilized or is underutilized, I want to know. And for me to do that, I need to install Azure Monitor agents on those local machines. So for me to use Azure Monitor, one, those machines need to be onboarded to Azure Arc. And Azure Arc is a tool that helps bring your local on-premise servers to Microsoft Azure. So what I did, instead of me to just go to each of the virtual machines and add, instead of me to go to each of the virtual machine and click on extensions, then install monitor extension. So what I did was I created a policy to install Azure Monitor on all the virtual machines. Ideally, I know that Azure Monitor have not been installed. So as soon as I created the policy, it flagged my virtual machine as non-compliant. So there are some policies that if you are creating it, it gives you a remediation task. That remediation task is more or less like, okay, if this resources does not meet this expected results, help me correct it. So once the remediation task starts, it automatically starts correcting those resources for you. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So we are going to be looking at definitions here. So we can see different definitions. So if you click on category, this category here now is flagged to all categories. So we can change it. We can actually change it to any category of our choice. So here now, I can just click on all categories here. So you can see all the categories. You can see for API, you can see for app configuration, but let's just uncheck all. Let's select compute so that we can see the policies you can create for virtual machines. So I'll just click on apply. So it will now filter and give me specific policy for compute. So here now, if I move this forward, we are going to see some settings there. So now, one of the policy names we have here is virtual machines and virtual machine scale sets should have encryption at host enabled. We know that this is a security feature. So what this means is that if I create this policy now, that means all virtual machine skill sets that I have, I'm saying that it should have encryption at host enabled. So any virtual machine skill set that doesn't have encryption at host enabled, it is not compliant. It's only the ones that have encryption at host enabled that will be compliant. So basically, after creating this policy, if I'm to create this one for security, it's going to flag virtual machine skill sets that are not compliant. What will I do as an administrator? I will now go and make those virtual machine skill set compliant by enabling encryption at the host. Then we have another one. Disk access resources should use private link. So this is, for instance, now, if you want to configure this access, you are trying to say that if somebody wants to access any disk, it should use private link. We have allowed virtual machine SKU. So what this allowed virtual machine SKU means is that, normally this size is what determines the capacity of your virtual machines. That's where the spec is. How many core processor, how many gig RAM. You can say, okay, you want to limit the particular sizes that users in your organization can use to create a virtual machine. So this is more or less like it helps you save costs because if you use a lower size, if somebody wants to create resources higher than that size, it will stop the person from creating it. So if I click on allowed virtual machine SKU size now, so here now we can see the policy definition here. Normally, policy definition is written in JSON. So we can see from here under the properties, we have the display name. So the display name is allowed virtual machine size SKU. And what is the description of the policy? This policy enables you to specify a set of virtual machine size SKU that your organization can deploy. Meaning that if I want to create this policy, I have the right to select the specific SKU that I want my organization to deploy and the ones that I don't want them to deploy. That's how this works. So if you scroll down, you will see the version, you will see some parameters, which is list of allowed SKUs and the likes. So let's take, for instance, I want to duplicate this template. You can actually do it because you may want to retweak it. There are some organizations that will tell you that, okay, we want the policy to be like this. Maybe you checked Microsoft policy definitions and maybe it's not meeting the expected requirements that your client wants. You can just click on duplicate policy here and duplicate the policy, then use it to create the one that you want. So here now, I'm going to click on assign. So if I click on assign policy, it means that I want to assign this policy to a scope. So I'll just click on assign here. So once I click on assign, it shows me several tabs here. We have the basic, we have parameter, we have remediation, we have non-compliance message, and we have review and create. So under the basic, now, by default, if I leave it this way, automatically I'm selecting the entire subscription. That means I want this policy to apply to my entire subscription, but I don't want it to be like that. So if you want to tailor it, you want to narrow the policy to apply to a specific resource group, you click on these three dots here. Once you click on these three dots here, it will now show you optionally choose a resource group. So I don't want this policy to apply to my entire subscription. Remember, like I was explaining the other time, you can apply a policy to your entire subscription in such a way that if anybody is trying to do something that is against the policy you are creating, it will reject. But I just want to apply this to a specific subscription. Then I'll click on resource group here. Then I'll come down and select our favorite resource group, which is YAF.CLOUD computing. I'll just select it. Then here now, I'll click on select. So now I've tailored the scope now. So scope, let's not confuse ourselves. Scope is more or less like you are defining where you are applying the policy to, who is inheriting the policy. Maybe for instance, we all know that each service group in church have their own policy. There are some service groups that they allow people to wear joggers. They allow people to wear maybe sneakers. They don't mind. You can wear sneakers. You can wear anything you like. But we all know that if you're in breakthrough engineering crew, you can't dress anyhow. You can't even wear polo and serve if you're in breakthrough engineering crew on Sunday. If you wear polo, you won't be able to serve, you won't be able to handle anything. You have to wear their vest, you have to wear their cardigan. So basically now, that particular rule applies to breakthrough. So that rule is not applying to the whole church. It's only applying to breakthrough engineering crew. And also, what I'm doing here is more or less like, I want to create an Azure policy. I don't want it to apply to the entire subscription. So the entire subscription here now is like the church. Then a particular resource group under my subscription is like a service group under the church, just like Breakthrough Engineering Crew. So as it is here now, I'm just applying this policy to YAF.CLOUD computing alone. I don't want it to apply to my entire subscription. I will now come down. Let's say, for instance, I want to add exclusions. Exclusion is more or less like you want to select resources to exclude from the policy. So if I click on this exclusion now, it will show me the resources I have under this YAF.CLOUD computing. If I collapse it now, I can exclude any of these resources and say, these resources, I don't want this policy to flag it. So all the exclusion is like, okay, you already, let me give an example. Let's say, for instance, in breakthrough engineering crew now, you want to create a policy that people that are wearing polo, they should not serve. But you now say, but if you're an ESCO, you will still be able to serve with polo. That means what you are trying to do is that you are excluding the ESCOs from the policy. So ESCOs can wear polo and serve, but normal members cannot wear polo and serve. So basically, this policy I'm creating for allowed virtual machine SKU, I can exclude some particular resources that are just like leaders also. But here now, I don't want to do that. But if I want to exclude any of these resources, I can just select them here and exclude. So you can exclude, you can add, you can remove, as the case may be, but I'm not excluding, but I just want to show us that you can exclude. So exclusions is in most of all the policies. So here now we can see the policy definition. The policy definition here is allowed virtual machine SKU, and the version is version 1.0. So the description here now, you can add any description. So it's good to add description when you are creating resources. So let me just say this policy is to prevent is to prevent is to prevent let me say is to prevent administrators from creating VMs that does not use our specific size and SKU. So now the description is this policy is to prevent administrators from creating VMs that does not use our specific size and SKU. The advantage of description is if you are working in an environment, you are not going to work there forever. You are going to leave. So basically, It means that if you're having descriptions, the person taking over from you will already know that, okay, this was why Yomi created this. This was why Joy created this. This was why Musa created this. So now we are done with the basic tab. So we'll now go to the parameter. So we'll come to the parameter here. So in the parameter here now, this is where we will now specify the particular size that we want. So if I collapse it here, I can now say I want it to be standard D2. I want this size, which is standard D2V2. So you could select any other size. You could say it must be standard D3V2. So if I select this guy now, that means if you are creating any VM in that resource group, if you don't select standard D3V2, it will not work. It won't work. It won't even allow you in the first place. So if I go next now and see remediation. So if we look at it here, by default, this assignment will only take effect on newly created resources. Existing resources can be updated via remediation tags. Here you see what I was telling you the other time, Corrode. So remediation, these are by default, the assignments will only take effect on newly created resources. Existing resources can be updated via remediation tags after the policy is assigned. For deployments, if not exists policy, the remediation tags will deploy the specified templates. So that's for remediation. So I just want you to get that. So now we have a warning here. The policy does not contain any role definition. Policy must specify role definitions in order to create the role assignment for the manage identity. So if you want to use manage identity now, so for you to use manage identity, your policy must specify a role definition in order to create the correct role assignment for the manage identity. So we're not using manage identity, but if you want to use manage identity, like the one it says here, the policy must specify a role definition in order to create the the correct role assignment for the manage identity. But we are not using manage identity here, so we'll just skip that. So for the non-compliant message now, this is the message that your administrator will see. So we can just say, sorry, boss, it is not allowed in this organization. So that's the non-compliant message. Sorry, boss, it is not allowed in this organization. So at least you creating the policy, you are trying to respect the person, because it could be your CTO that wants to create the resources. So at least if the person says, sorry, boss, they will say, ah, at least this person really respected me. So let me go over the settings again. If you come to basic, here you can assign the scope that you want the policy to apply to. The scope is the subscription, but not my entire subscription. I'm targeting YAF Cloud Computing. I'm not adding any exclusion, but if I want to add any exclusion, I can exclude. So the policy definition is allowed virtual machine sizes SKU. So if we go to next now, you will see the size. So you select the particular size you want under parameters. So if you come to remediation, you can add a remediation task, but for you to use a remediation task, you need a manage identity that will do that for you. So if we look at here, policy with the deployed not effect and modify effect type need the ability to deploy resources and edit tags on existing resources. So for you to use remediation, you need a manage identity. And you can see here, for you to do that, policy must specify the role definition in order to create the correct role assignment. So if you are creating any policy that you want remediation to happen, you want it to automatically update existing resources, then automatically your policy need to meet this requirement so that you can be able to use manage identity. So, but let's just keep for that. So it depends on you if you want to do that. So the non-compliance message now we can see here, sorry boss, it is not allowed. So we can just review and create. So we'll create, once it creates, we are going to create another policy because I want us to understand different policies that we can create. So this policy has been created now. So we'll go back to policy definition and create another policy again. So remember, the category we select was compute. So let's see storage. let's see policies we can create for storage.
So,
Yeah, you can ask your question.
okay. The previous policy that we created, does it have a specification? As in something that will distinguish it from the second policy we're about to create?
Yes, it will. It will. So the name is the name will differentiate it, and the version. So it will differentiate it. The name will
Like that
differentiate
for
it. That
exactly
first
is
one
the
I
name.
create now. That first one I create
Hmm.
now, the allowed SKU, that's the name. Then the one I want to create now, the name will be storage account should have specific minimum TLS. So depend if that is one I want to create. So that's what it will have.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we can see here
Please tell us the
on
meaning of SKU.
SKU.
The full meaning. Does it
So
have a full meaning?
why not? It has it has a
And
it
that's
has a it has a it has a full meaning. So
what's the full meaning of SKU, sir?
okay, can you guess? Can you guess?
Storage. Um,
And can
mm,
somebody guess? Can somebody guess what SKU means?
storage.
Yes, stock keeping units.
Wow, stock
Yes.
keeping unit. Wow. So that's it. That's it. Stock keeping unit. So that's what SKU is in Azure. So at least we have all learned that. So let's continue with our presentation. So for storage accounts now, under storage category, so you can see various settings you can specify. Storage account should have specific minimum TLS version. You can say if you are creating your storage account, if it does not meet this specific TLS version, it should not allow. I just hope we are getting understanding from this Azure policy. It's used to enforce governance actually. Like for instance, if you some people if they are joining meeting, they don't mute their mic. So automatically they can cause distraction in the meeting. But if you want to enforce governance, you can say you want to turn off mic for everybody that is participating. That's governance. Even if you want to unmute your mic, you won't be allowed until you drop on the chat. Please, I want to talk. Then they will now unmute your mic for you. So that is just an example of governance because at that time you are enforcing rule whether you like it or not, you have to abide by that rule. If you don't abide by that rule, no. And we should know that it's best practice. It's best practice anywhere. So that's just one advantage of policy. So I want us to create a policy here. I want us to create a policy for a storage account. So let's see. Yeah. Let's use limited by SKU. So hope the class is interesting. Hope we're enjoying the class.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. Hope we
Yes.
are understanding. Okay, let me ask somebody. Abati, can you tell me what is Azure policy? Your own definition, what you understand by Azure policy. 2 seconds, 2 seconds. If you are not there, I'll call another person. Okay, so let's go to Inenna. Inenna, can you tell me what you understand by Azure policy? From the practicals I've done, can you just talk about it?
Okay. In my own perspective, I think what I understood by Azure policy is the standard or is a laid down rule that Azure is allowed and what it does not allow to function.
Yes, yes. That's a good try. That's a good try. Yeah, you really tried. Do you want to continue? Do you want to say something else?
I said it also has various versions like um, Azure policy allowed SKU, and Azure TLS version.
Yeah. So one
Not
thing I one thing you are trying to do is you are trying to now master those settings. The truth is, Microsoft has a lot of policies. You can't know all the policies, but basically, if you want to use anyone, let me come back. Let me go back a bit. Let me come back to policy again. If you click on policy now, if you come to definitions, you're going to see several policy definitions there. So from policy definition here now, you can create a policy, but let it load. So now it has loaded. So if you click on categories now, like you were explaining, you are very correct. You are very correct, but I don't want you to cram or try to master all the policy names. So basically, if you want to like create a policy for storage. So now, once you come here and you select storage and you click on apply under the category, you are going to see the various policies for storage. So like you made mention earlier, so Azure Storage is used by organization to enforce their organization settings in their environment, settings that administrator must adhere to. Example, they can configure policy that affects their storage account. Example, you can now say, okay, to limit, maybe for instance, you want to enforce security in the storage account for specified TLS version. If it's less than TLS, if it's less than 1.0, it should not allow. It has to be TLS 1.2, which is good. And you are specifying it because your applications, that's the version they support. So those are the things that you can do like that. So can any other person say something about Azure policy? Any other person? I don't want to call names. Or should I call names? Okay, Abati, you can talk. Yeah,
Okay, sir.
yeah, you can go ahead. What?
Azure Policy is a tool in Microsoft Azure that helps to control and enforce rules for cloud resources. It helps
Okay.
maybe organizations, individuals, any company to enforce rules among their staffs or among people that they are sharing um the cloud with.
Okay. That's a nice one. That's a nice one. So now the Azure policy, thank you very much for that contribution. So the Azure policy we are creating now is storage account should be limited by allowed SKU. So like we did the other time, if you look at the description, it restricts the set of storage account SKU that your organization can deploy. Meaning that if you are trying to deploy, you have to use a specific SKU. So I will now come here, click on assign. Like I mentioned the other time, the scope, you can apply it to the entire subscription or you select a specific resource group under the subscription. So at Adibin, I have two subscriptions, it will show, but I only have one. So I'll just come down and select our favorite resource group. You have cloud computing, click on select. Then here now we can see the policy definitions. Storage account should be linked by allowed SKU. So we'll just go next. So under the parameters now, I'll now select the SKU. So here now, if I select standard, maybe let me select all the standards. So that means if you are trying to create a storage account, I don't want you to use premium. I want it to be standard. I want to save our money. I don't want anybody in the organization to create a storage account with premium. So we'll click outside the box. Then we go next. Under the remediation, the same thing. If you want to do it, then you need to create a managed identity. But I don't want to do that, so we'll just go next. So for the non-compliance message, you can say, hi there. we don't allow premium SKU. So that's the message that the person will see. Then you go next, you create. So we have just created another policy, like the question Inena asked, like with the name change. So we are going to prove that. So now that the policy, let me see if it has created, it has successfully created. So we'll come back to policy again. So if you come to compliance, you are going to see all the policy that you have created. So let me close this notification. Now we can see the ones we created, right? Allowed virtual machine SKU is there. So out of 2, some are not compliant. So this one now, require resource, some are not compliant. Allowed virtual machine SKU, allowed virtual machine size 2. Out of 2 is non-compliant. So if we refresh this page, the new one we just created should show. Let me refresh the page. So let's come down. So like I always tell you guys, Azure environment is not hard. It's just to know what you want to create. That's all. So we can see here, storage account now, like Inina, to answer your question, you can see that the first one we created was allowed virtual machine SKU size. Here now, this one has finished. But this storage account should be limited by allowed SKU. It has not started. It's in a not started state. So now let's click on this first one, allowed virtual machine SKU. Let's see. So now we can see here. So here, none of my virtual machine existing will meet that requirement. So you can see I have 2 virtual machines, which is Ansible control plane and YAF app server. So these 2 virtual machines does not meet the requirement. That is why it's non-compliant. So what will I do as an admin? I will now go to the size and make sure that the virtual machine meets this particular specification. So if we look at it here, it has to be standard D3V2. If it is not standard D3V2, then it is not compliant because that was what we specified. So let's come back to the page here. So we can see it. So these 2 virtual machines are not compliant. They are not compliant. So if, for instance, now you want to do audit in your organization and you want to know resources that are not compliant before the auditors come, because what auditors do is that once they come, they check your environment to see loopholes. Now, for instance, maybe the auditors are like, okay, your resources or the sizes of your VM has to be on a specific size. And you know that any VM that are not on those size, auditors will flag it. So basically, you can come here and flag yourself, then you correct it by yourself. So that's just the way this one work. So let's go back. Let's see the other one that we created. Let's see if it has completed. This storage account not started. Let me refresh. Let me refresh it. Okay. So, okay, still not started. Sometimes it takes time. It doesn't start immediately. It takes time. It takes time to start. So, but it will. So why this is running? Let's talk about Azure pricing. Azure pricing. So Azure pricing is very important because cost is very key in terms of Microsoft Azure. So if you have any question before we go to Azure pricing, you can ask. You can ask anybody with any question. We'll still come back to check this policy if it has started or if it has not started. Anybody with any question, please? Anybody? Okay. Seems we're all
I want
understood.
to ask a question.
Yeah, you can ask your question.
As a cloud engineer, do we have do we have limitations in some aspects of cloud security or